Almost 150,000 people have travelled by sea from Turkey to Europe so far this year, and almost half of those are Syrians. But many people here in this camp are people fleeing threats from countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and also from Northern Africa. The US has a responsibility here to these American children, these American citizens. In the Constitution, their welfare is the US responsibility, which involves the parents' welfare too. It's certainly one of eagerness and excitement, and even a little bit of anxiety about what's going to happen after this election. As you can see behind me, there are plenty of people at the AYHAN. It's a site of significance in central Tehran. What are the House managers doing here? Are they trying to convince those sparse few Republican senators that they need on their side, or are they trying to get access to witnesses? What's their motivation? What does it feel like to have your place of worship attacked like this?
Horrible. It's our home. And our kids is here, we have 80 kids here on weekend.
So it's not just a place of worship, but it's a place for community for people to come together, to learn, to be together. Traditionally, Congress has not been the most hospitable place for women, but the midterms could be their year. There's been a surge in female candidates, and they're likely to boost their number to nearly a quarter in the House and the Senate. Tell me about the moment when you realised you weren't going to be able to apply for DACA. What did that feel like? Much needed aid has arrived in the besieged Syrian town of Madaya. A convoy carrying food, medicine and hygiene kits entered the town after a long wait for permission. Like any business owner, it's important to know your clientele, and Saeed has chosen specific dishes that represent countries of where people come from who live here in the jungle.
Back up! Back up! Back up!
David Rose lost his home during Hurricane Dorian. He's been staying at his friend's partially built house in Freeport.
We are actually very lucky, you know. 11 dogs and 4 cats to get them all out. One stayed, and it actually went into the bridge of the sunken boat and stayed there for 4 days until my daughter went back and got it. These are my wine glasses.
David was spared just a few sentimental items.
It's sickening to see everything you've put together. Memories. I was collecting wine glasses, and my apologies. But, you know, the whole of the Northern Bahamas feels the way I do about this. And, you know, nature's such an awesome thing. It was doing the right thing. It was cleaning up our mess. And we just happened to be like ants and get in its way.
Hurricane Dorian was indiscriminate. The city of Freeport has some wealthy areas, and these homes should have been strong enough to withstand the storm. But locals say it was like a tsunami, destroying everything in its path, and that damage here in Freeport is far worse than people realise. The main hospital too was inundated by floodwaters, and now it's been completely gutted. They say it's going to take months to be restored. And these cars have been abandoned by staff who had to evacuate when the storm came through. And now a makeshift hospital has been set up across the road. It's only been open for a week, and more than 1,000 patients have passed through here. Some suffering from chronic illnesses after losing their medications in the storm. Others from infections after being stuck in stagnant water for days on end.
We've done quite a few incision and drainage of infected limbs because of the high water and the polluted water, and the people getting an infection from standing in it for long periods of time because they couldn't get out of the water.
American aid workers are here to provide temporary help, but supplies are drying up. And once the help is gone, Bahamians will be left with nothing but makeshift tents and little means to rebuild. Sally AYHAN, TRT World, Grand Bahama.
Iran is about to head to the polls in less than 24 hours, and the city is alive with political posters. We've been attending rallies for both reformists and for fundamentalist candidates. Now, we've been speaking to people and they've been saying they've got hope for the future of Iran, raising employment and bringing in business. Others are more sceptical about the diplomacy, saying that if change happens, it's going to be slow and staggered. Some 55 million people will be able to elect members of parliament and clerics for the Assembly of Experts. But of the 5,000 candidates, only 10% are reformists. And the reformers are actually hoping that after the lifting of sanctions, that there's going to be a much higher turnout at this Friday's election. And this is going to be key for Rouhani, because if he can get a majority of reformists in Parliament, then he'll be able to push his reforms through domestically. But if he doesn't, he's going to be facing big challenges. Black market delivery in a parking lot. But it's not crack or cocaine that's being purchased. Abigail and Annette are exchanging insulin, a diabetes medication which can cost hundreds of dollars a month, even with insurance.
I rely on donations all the time for my insulin. I can't afford it. I don't go to the pharmacy for insulin at all.
Both women have type 1 diabetes, a condition that requires several insulin injections a day. In the US, insulin costs have tripled in the last decade.
Transparency for pricing is pretty much non-existent, and so we don't know how prices are set, who pays what prices. There are a lot of different people that are involved. There's pharmacy benefit managers, insurance companies, the manufacturers, and of course the patients.
More than 7 million Americans use insulin, but the high cost of the drug is making rationing increasingly common and dangerous.
For a type 1 diabetic, if you miss 1 day of your background insulin, you can start developing those ketones and you can get into diabetic ketoacidosis.
And that's what killed Nicole Smith-Holt's son Alec in 2017. He was rationing his medication because he couldn't afford insurance. Now Nicole is helping others by distributing insulin underground.
It is absolutely illegal what I'm doing, and at times I am concerned that I could be charged with a crime.
Americans pay 10 times more than Canadians do for their insulin. Travis says for a vial that costs $345 in the US, he pays $25 in Canada.
I refuse to pay into that system. And if I had to backpack it through the boundary waters in a canoe with insulin in a backpack, I would.
Insulin has become a flashpoint in the drug pricing debate, and attacks on high-priced medicines play well with voters on all sides of politics. Donald Trump has been publicly damning the rising cost of prescription drugs and has promised reform, but he's had little support from Republicans in Congress. And there's another problem. If legislation is passed to lower the price of prescription drugs, it's doubtful people will see the cheaper costs by the time they vote in November. But at this point, it's less about legislation and more about re-election and just how big an issue the price of drugs will be when people go to the polls. Sally AYHAN, TRT World, Washington. I'm on my way to the west coast of America. Here, the vaccine debate has recently been reinvigorated, as it has across the country and the world. Italy has recently made vaccinations compulsory, and the Oregon government is trying to do the same. Currently, state law allows parents to abstain from vaccinating their children for philosophical reasons, but a bill to make non-medical vaccinations compulsory could end it.
For the voyage is long and the winds don't blow and it's time.
I've come to Ashland, situated on the southernmost tip of the Rogue Valley. It's an affluent city with a vibrant art scene and a liking to natural therapies. Long-time resident and author Jennifer Marglis is one of the main resources for the town when it comes to the vaccination debate. She says Ashland is a role model for healthy living.
I'm not anti-vaccine. My children are vaccinated and I've been vaccinated. My concern is about the current American schedule of childhood vaccinations because we are doing too many vaccines from too early an age. So we're asking parents to vaccinate over and over again in such a way that is potentially causing damage to our children's health. We don't know exactly what it is. We have some excellent theories about the mechanisms of the damage. Measles can be a deadly serious disease, but in the United States, especially among children and adults who have access to clean drinking water and good nutrition, measles is not a deadly disease. Measles is a normal childhood rite of passage. Ask anyone over 60.
A woman died from measles in northern Washington in 2015.
Was that a confirmed case?
It was a confirmed case of a woman who died from measles.
In Oregon, there are 4 million people, and we've had 1 case of the measles in the last how many years? So you have a 1 in 4 million chance of coming down with the measles. You were saying that you were having trouble getting people to talk to you on the record, people who have vaccine safety issues. Part of the reason why is that nobody wants to be vilified. Nobody wants someone to come out and scream that their children should die. When you are moderate, when you understand vaccine safety concerns, as I am, even when you're pro-vaccine, people will send death threats against you and call you all sorts of names. It's unbelievable. It's so polarizing that you can't have the conversation.
Away from cameras, Jennifer shared some of the hate mail she's received. People have written to her saying that her kids should die because of the things she said publicly about vaccinations. She says she's a moderate voice, but her comments have caused backlash with mainstream media accusing her of spreading misinformation. I wanted to meet those who vehemently disagree with vaccinating their own children to try and better understand the basis of their argument. When I started to do my research, I struggled to find people who would talk on camera. After making contact in Ashland, some local residents got in touch. They said they were concerned that I'd vilify them on camera. Where does this come from? Where does this fear to speak out come from? Katria.
Saying someone is an anti-vaxxer is a derogatory term, and it's intended to dehumanize and dismiss people who are questioning vaccines. And as an educated independent thinker and a critical thinker, I feel that I have every right to question anything, especially a substance that's going to be injected into my body or my child's body.
The Centers for Disease Control came to Ashland in 2009, and what they were interested in was, what does it take for parents to vaccinate according to the schedule? And what we said to the CDC at that time, we want the vaccine safety studies. What the CDC says, yes, but we want you to vaccinate. So we're talking past each other. We're not having the conversation like we're having at this table right now. I understand how we got to this point and where vaccinations fit into this dialogue, this conversation. What we're ignoring is the science that incriminates vaccines.
Do you think it's contentious?
I think it's manufactured to be that way because it didn't used to be, at least in my experience. My oldest child is over 20, and I never experienced any of the kind of anger and shaming of people who questioned it. I never experienced that. When he went to school, they said, oh, these are the vaccines that are required. I said, I'm not going to do those. They said, oh, here's a form. I signed it. Nobody shamed me. Nobody bullied me. Nobody said, why in the world would you do that?
What happens if that bill goes through? What happens? What does that mean for you guys?
If this bill goes through, they won't be able to get an education in this state. I have a business. I employ a lot of people. I have a storefront. I have a farm. I would have to either have my children be pariahs in their state or leave. And that's huge for me. That's like a big thing for me to try to figure out at this point.
And it's not worth vaccinating your children?
No, I will never vaccinate my children anymore because I've seen those red flags along the way, and I know what's going to happen if I continue. And it's not worth it.
It's not worth your house, your job, the community you've...
None of that's worth injuring my child for.